Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 59. Before I get into today's interview, I want to welcome and thank the new Patreon supporters who have joined me recently and let you know how much your support helps me keep going with this podcast project. Putting out this podcast is a hugely joyful process for me, and at the same time, it takes many, many hours to prepare each episode. Your Patreon pledge makes this possible, and I think of you every week when I'm at my computer editing, so thank you. Now, I'm very excited to share today's guest with you because she's a nature journal teacher who has a very unique way of connecting her students with the natural world. Heather Winslow LeFebvre uses nature and history. In her nature journaling classes, Heather explores the life and landscape of some very famous authors like Beatrix Potter, Jane Austen, and the Brontë sisters. She also has a very lovely ritual which is a part of all her classes. Are you ready to find out what it is? Let's listen. Heather, thank you so much for being here with me. I am really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So, as a podcast listener, you know that I always ask my guests in the beginning, do they have nature in their early life? And I'm wondering that for you. Was nature part of your life from the beginning?
It sure was. It's so fascinating because so much of our own lives begin with our parents' lives. And my parents grew up in and around New York City. And then after they got married, they decided to move to Vermont. Wow. So and this was at the beginning of the 1970s, and there was this sort of back to the country movement. They were friends with people that lived off the grid and didn't have electricity and were raising their own food. So they moved to Vermont, upstate Vermont. It was, just so unpopulated and kind of a little bit, wild maybe. And so that's where I was born in the late 70s and just surrounded by woods, and behind our house was a field, and we could look up and see the mountains with the ski slopes. And I was just a product of where I was born. And I think I thought every place was this majestic and amazing.
Yes.
So, and my mom had, part of that whole back to the earth thing. She'd taken classes in mushrooming and identifying wildflowers. And she would take me into the woods, and we would feel the moss and smell the pine. And, wow. Always she was identifying all the flowers. And, I just thought, well, this is what I need to do. But interestingly, we didn't stay in Vermont. When I was nearly 5, we moved to upstate New York. And then when I was 7, we moved to central Pennsylvania. Each place had its own different new surroundings. So I became exposed to a lot of different places. And then when I was nearly 12, we moved all the way over to Uganda, East Africa.
Oh, wow.
And that was just an explosion for somebody who's interested in nature, to be put there in the midst of just a tropical paradise, really is what it was. And actually, I posted on my Instagram this past week. I still have a journal from that time, and I was looking at it, and so many of the entries are actually nature journal entries, and I had no idea. But I was so fascinated by, the things I was discovering there. So in my teen years, we moved back to the States. I ended up in downtown Chicago, which was kind of a nature desert at that time, back when some of the city's emphasis hadn't been put on parks quite yet. And then I ended up in Indiana, but I did end up living in Scotland for 4 years later on. So I count it a privilege to have been able to experience so many different surroundings, and each one is kind of dear to my heart in a different way.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And tell me about what you see when you step outside now where you live.
So it's really different. And I've lived or been from Indiana now for 27 years. And so it's kind of a place that I have chosen to look for beauty and to find it. And it kind of has grown on me over the years. It's very flat. There's a lot of farmland. I live in the suburbs, so we have a lot of city too. But um, I have learned to describe where I live as sort of woodland if I can get out of my neighborhood. There's woodland and reservoirs, and we have the deer and the raccoons, great blue herons, the kind of animals you would associate with rivers, reservoirs, and woodland. So we have a lot of deciduous trees. That would be the main tree. So,
When you were speaking about your mum and the move to this amazing place and the sort of rewilding of themselves, it reminded me of what I'm seeing now. Do you feel like we're going back to that wild foraging and this excitement about connecting with nature?
oh, it is so funny. My mom actually, at times kind of laughs at us because she's like, oh, we went to the farms and got ourselves raw milk back then, and now look, everyone's doing that again. She says
We were way ahead of you.
I remember going to the farms in Vermont, and that whole cow manure smell is actually kind of special to me because it was one of the scents that I connect with that first bit of my childhood. And my parents had a huge garden. I remember having to help them with it. They were raising their food. My mom was canning it. She was making things. We can talk about the art in a little bit, but it happens to be that my mom and grandmother were both professional artists, and my aunt and uncle as well. So,
Wow.
but yeah, it's kind of strange to think what goes around comes around.
Yes, yes. That's amazing. Okay, let's talk about art. Were you making art from the beginning because you had all these influences around you?
So I was. So it kind of has both a good and a difficult sort of effect on me because my mom had grown up in such an artistic family and was an artist by profession herself. She was there crayoning with us from day one of our lives and all that. We had access to the watercolors and all of that. And then with my aunt and uncle who paint oils sort of in the spirit of the Dutch masters type, I was exposed to this really amazing art from early on. And I have to say that it enabled me to have such an appreciation for it, but it also it was a little intimidating, to be
Yes.
honest, because I had such high ideals for what I
Yeah.
wanted my own personal art to be. It kind of put me off starting for a while. I finally had to just get over that and jump in. And also, that's partially what nature journaling is so good for, is that the
Yes.
point isn't we're not creating works of art, we're celebrating life and nature and learning and yeah, just kind of creating connection.
Absolutely.
So
The Nature Journal is such a wonderful place for practicing. It's a practice because we all struggle with it, but practicing letting go of that need for perfection, that need to make something perfect. So
yeah.
that's great that you found that way to do it. And I'd love to know how your nature journaling journey started. It sounds like it started way back in your teen years, but without knowing it.
I was thinking about this, and it's kind of funny that I had discovered those entries again this week because, so another little interesting part is that I happen to have been homeschooled, which provided a really amazing opportunity for being able to do as much art. And a lot of it was crafting more than art, as much as we wanted. And we could delve into the subjects that we wanted, and we could spend a lot of time outdoors. So I was raised being homeschooled. I can't even remember when the word Charlotte Mason entered my vocabulary, but it had to have been as a teen, maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know. And then I went on to actually homeschool my kids for maybe 15 years. So it's hard to know, when did I know about nature journaling? Clearly, I was doing it as a teen. I really got deeply involved in it when I needed a part-time job. And my friend was like, why don't you just do nature journaling classes for kids?
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, sure, I can do that. I mean, that just goes right in line with everything I love. So I think at that point I must have gone to my library and gotten out all the books. And, that was John Muir Laws and Claire Walker Leslie. Got them out, kind of got a little bit more formulated in my mind how I wanted to pursue this, and started the classes. So,
do you want to mention a little bit about the Charlotte Mason philosophy? Because she's all about nature, all about nature study. But for those who don't know about Charlotte Mason, do you want to mention a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. I wish I was. Someday I need to do a class on her so that I get all my facts straight. In fact, I put that on my list. But for the Charlotte Mason people out there, close your ears for a moment. I'm just going to give the layman's view.
Yeah,
here.
Absolutely. Just a quick overview.
Yeah, so she comes from the Lake District area of England, and she was way ahead of her time as far as educational philosophies go. And she wanted children to be able to get out in nature and experience nature for real, not just in books. She wanted them to read stories of really high caliber, not just be entertained, really. And she really wanted adults to interact with children as human beings, and not as somebody, not an equal. So she wrote a lot of books on education. She's been a huge influence on certain areas of the homeschool world. And yeah, so she really advocates this, going out for nature walks, exploration, and then writing it all down in a journal.
Yeah, she's big in the nature journaling homeschooling community, isn't she?
Yes.
So now you are a nature journal teacher, and you have this really unique angle to what you teach, and you combine history and literature and nature journaling. And I'd love to know about how this all came together, this unique combination of things that you teach.
Well, I think it has to do with homeschooling, because when I was teaching my kids, I found that I needed to be very interested in what I was teaching, and I wanted them to be very interested. Otherwise, we were going to be bored stiff, and no one was going to enjoy the experience at all. And so I think it kind of came about to combine subjects a little bit. If we were studying history, we were going to maybe combine and do some food studies with that, or we were going to do some nature studies that went along with that. If we were going to read a book, we were going to go and visit a place that connected with that. So it was all about connecting things, what we like, and I personally like history and literature and nature. So I thought, I just need it all in one class. Why leave out anything? I mean, we could throw in some music in there too, and food. And so one year I actually was given the chance to teach a 2-week class at a high school. And I said, okay, we're going to take 10 of our favorite authors and artists. We're going to study their lives, but we're going to just discover the nature they were interested in, and we're going to nature journal that, and we're going to have tea parties every day based on the food and tea they drank. And we're going to watch a movie about them too. So it went on, and all these pieces were added, and I mean, the students loved it, and I loved watching their work, and they got all interested in it. And the adults that were seeing the pictures about this wanted the classes too. And so I thought, well, okay, I'll do them for adults. So
it's amazing. It's such a fantastic idea. I love it. And you've got nature journal classes online, and one of them explores the lives and landscape of Jane Austen, the Brontë sisters, Beatrix Potter, another exploring the life and landscape of James Herriot. I'm wondering so much about this. Firstly, I'm wondering, where did this passion for English literature in particular come from? Was it your time in Scotland? Was it Charlotte Mason? Where did that come from?
I know, it's so fascinating because it turned out that most of these women or people were from Britain. Although we're going to be doing 3 North American coming up here: Louisa May Alcott, Ellen Montgomery, and Laura Ingalls Wilder. They are part of that 10. I don't know. I know that some of it started when we lived in Uganda. There's a tradition of, or a sort of a British influence because of the years that was under the rule of Great Britain. We had British friends there. Our ancestry is very close. My great grandparents came from England and Scotland to America, so it's close in our family history. I think it's just these stories that I loved. I was big into biographies as a teenager. I admired all these women mostly so much. Women that went out there and did something or wrote something. And so I think it's all of my teenage heroes that have turned into these classes.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And I love that you say life and landscape. These two things are so much intermingling, and our landscape influences our life. The climate we live in influences the way we live. And I'm interested about those choice of words. Can you talk about life and landscape?
Yes. Oh, I love the combination of that too, because they are so intertwined. And I mean, you think about the Brontes that lived on this windswept moor.
Yes.
And they lived surrounded by that cemetery where so many of their sisters and their mother was buried, and you just get this whole desolate, windswept feeling. And yet they were so tied in love to that landscape, and they knew all the past. They knew every bird and the calls and the little flowers. They could recognize everyone, and it brought them such joy. And then it all came out into their writings.
Yes.
And those stories that they created, and the nature is all through the stories. And so, yeah, and then I think that we just need to see how much our own lives are influenced by our landscapes. And, it's what would we say, a silent character in the own theater of our lives. Or the backdrop. Maybe the backdrop of our life is the nature that we live in. So I think that nature journaling helps us to connect our own lives and landscape, and studying someone else helps us to see how it worked out in their life, and thus gives us a mirror to look into our own.
Yes. I'm thinking about those books, like Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, Pride and Prejudice, them marching across the field, or in Wuthering Heights, the windswept moors.
Yeah. Oh, and so I have to bring up this fascinating point. So everyone writes, of course, what's going on in their own world at that time. And Jane Austen was a product of her time period, in which the nature fad at that time was the picturesque movement. And this was looking for very sort of romantic scenes. They wanted old castle ruins, falling down trees. And they would go out and paint these things, but they would kind of touch them up a little bit so that if the castle wasn't falling down enough, they would tumble down in their pictures. So there was this whole scenario that they wanted to capture. And even the instructions would say, you don't need to say what kind of a tree it is, merely that it is a tree, and put it in.
That's amazing.
I know. So it's just funny to think that the nature exploration fad of Jane Austen's time was this picturesque, and she alludes to it and quotes and even makes fun of this John Gilpin who promoted this picturesque. So
that's interesting. And those upper classes in that era had a lot of leisure time, and painting, a woman was supposed to be able to sing and paint and all that stuff. So they would have had lots of time for nature study. I'm wondering, is there one book in particular that is your favorite that has influenced you the most?
From these authors here?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's so hard to choose. I guess at this point, Jane Eyre is my favorite. But favorites kind of change as
They do.
But it's really quite an amazing story, and just how it all works out together in the end. And she overcomes such adversity, and is able to, forgive, and she also is able to marry the person that she loves in the end, which is always
We
nice.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm influenced by these books as well. In my life story, I had a big period of being very, very unwell. And during that period, I had to have a sort of shift. I used to be the person who was very active. I used to go hiking all the time. And then I wasn't able to do that. And I had to change my world, or my opinion of myself, or my who I was, and I became the person who would read all the classics. And so I've read Wuthering Heights a couple of times. Yes. I've read all these books maybe one or two times, and yeah, they're goodies, aren't they?
Yes, they sure are.
So you do this beautiful thing called what you call tea time, and I'd love for you to explain about tea time. It's so sweet.
No. Well, we had to include tea time mostly because I love it so much, and I think that I need to include it because tea time for me is an emotional filling of my own cup, and it's also a time to just sit down and enjoy nature. If I'm inside, I mean, I love it if I can have some flowers from the garden there, but often I try to figure out ways to have tea parties outside in nature, and it's a way that I can often invite to have this time with a friend. And I just think it's a wonderful way to share with a friend, maybe share nature time. But again, when we're talking about the literature classes and combining all of that, for me, tea time is a way to actually taste history. And of course, I'm wanting to involve all of our senses in this exploration as we talk about what we see on the nature exploration and all of that. But tasting history, we can make a kind of food that maybe they specifically ate, drink the kind of tea that they drank, and think about that. But mostly it's a way of filling my emotional bucket, because I know you asked this at the end. But for me, being out in nature is, when I'm exploring nature, it's so heart focused and filling me up emotionally. But often when I write in my journal or record things, it's more emotionally draining, and that's where the head comes in for me. And so I kind of want to balance all of that work with another form of emotional filling up, and that's tea time.
I love that.
It's a perfect time to also, maybe read a nature-based poem or a book or something, or even better, promise the children that if they'll come on a nature walk, we'll have tea time at the end.
So your kids love tea time as well?
Oh, yeah. Now, I do have one child, bless his soul. He does not like anything hot to drink.
Okay.
So we just leave it at that, but he will eat whatever I have.
And so tea time for you is actually more than just a cup of tea. It's a bit of a ritual, isn't it? You have beautiful things around you.
Yes, I do. I mean, not every time that I have tea do I pull out the china and stuff, but I do like to have the china, and that's another way to connect with the past. And I was thinking about it. I can't remember who mentioned it this week, but letting children use the china is a way of showing them that they are that grown-up person that Charlotte Mason wants them to feel like, that they're worth investing in by allowing them to experience this.
Yeah. And I've seen pictures of you dressed, and you say, we're going to have tea with Jane Eyre today, for example. Yeah. Tell me about this, about getting into character.
Well, again, it all just stems from, I think, things that grew up in my childhood, and I just love recreating historical fashion as much as, reading about these things. It's another way to experience. So for my classes, I did want to get into character and just kind of give the whole feel of what tea time was like, what the outfits looked like, and to give them the historical, what was happening in the tea world with tea at that time.
Talking about tea in this way reminded me of a previous guest that I had on here, Candace Rose Red, and she has just put out a book, and it's called Stuff Every Tea Lover Should Know, and it's all about teas. This is maybe the perfect book for you.
I think so. I need to get that and then recommend it to my people.
I love this because Britain loves tea. I've been there. I've stayed with the family in Yorkshire, and they love tea. It's like chain drinking tea.
Exactly.
I love that you have an idea about what the Brontes would have drunk and how they would have had it, how they would have served it, and the history of the tea and all that stuff. It's really beautiful and special.
Well, thanks. It's fun.
One theme that seems to be recurring in your work is the seasons, and I'd love to know about how the seasons influence your nature journaling practice.
Oh, I really do love the change of the seasons, and I guess that comes from being born in Vermont, where that fall season especially is so incredibly beautiful, and winter is very much there. I guess because I'm a person that enjoys a lot of sort of change and new and exciting things, the seasons provide that constant change, that sort of conveyor belt as we go through the year. And I'm just always noticing and telling my students, every 2 weeks, there's such a different change, at least when you live in the seasonal world. And so it just provides something new all of the time, and helps us to be present, I think, in the moment when we're focusing on that, whatever it is right there. It was interesting living in Uganda, where the seasons were not there as we think of them. You had to get actually more noticeable of the dry and the wet seasons and things that grew during those times and how that all worked. But I do love the seasonal, and I love to decorate and sort of change over my china, and it just kind of helps to celebrate life, I guess.
Yeah, and it gives a rhythm. And I guess you can look back on your pages and see, this is what happened at this time of year last year, and then this year it's a little different, this is the time when we see this happening.
And I'm always also advocating for those little diaries that have about 4 lines for every day and 5 years in one. And I just think it's the best way to start nature journaling is one of those little diaries, just a sentence a day with the temperatures. And then you can just see how things flow year to year and season to season. It gives a lot of information for such a tiny little thing.
I love that idea, because then it really gets rid of that anxiety about art, doesn't it? Because you don't have space for making some perfect picture. You could do a tiny diagram, but there's no place for art anxiety in a tiny journal like that.
Exactly.
Let's chat about materials. You have a specific set of watercolors that you use in all your classes, and I'm really passionate about color. I love chatting about color, and I'd love to know about the 6 colors that you've chosen and why you love these particular colors so much.
Well, every once in a while I'm like, I'm so sick of my 6 colors. Could I please get some new ones? But I decided early on I was going to go with 6 colors because I wanted a limited palette. Because it's just, I feel as a beginner especially, so much easier if you don't have too many choices.
Yes.
And it also forces us to practice the color mixing. And I guess looking at my work, I think one of my themes is how can we simplify and get something down in a limited amount of time? I'm always conscious of the limited amount of time. And I think just the 6 colors keeps us from spending too much time stressing about the colors.
Yes.
I know that I needed a red, and I decided on that quinacridone red rose deep because I could get a pink from it too by just adding more water. I get my paints from Cheap Joe's art supply online, and I wanted artist quality watercolors, but something that was affordable. And so it's their own line of American Journey watercolors, and they come out with a Joe's Yellow, which I think is a little bit similar to an Aurelian. Oh, I haven't pronounced that word in a while. Aurelian. I can never say that. Yes.
I say Aurelian. I don't know.
That's it. That's it. I haven't said it out loud in a while. And then I wanted a green that was just there, so we didn't have to mix every single green. So I chose sap green. I really like sap green. And two blues, because I have to have ultramarine to mix with burnt sienna.
Yes.
For all of my sort of grays, and the blue grays is sort of Payne's gray. But for skies, cerulean, and for bright greens, I needed that cerulean. And I couldn't do without burnt sienna. So that's kind of how I chose. And again, sometimes I'm frustrated by it. But in the end, it meets my goal of less decisions. This works. It's easy to carry. And, you know, you can get something close to that in a basic Winsor & Newton set. So, yeah.
I'm wondering about the materials that were used by your influences, for example, Beatrix Potter. Do you know what she used to create her beautiful illustrations?
Well, she was using watercolors, but no, I should look into that. Where was she getting them, and who supplied them? Oh, I should do some research, add a little bit to my class.
I'm interested in the history of color. We were talking the other day. We have a cloud group, and we were talking about Prussian blue, and it went through a bit of a when it first came out, it was like all the rage and everyone was using Prussian blue. And I'd be so interested to hear about Beatrix Potter's materials and what was in vogue back then, and what was available and what wasn't available and that sort of thing.
Okay, I think I need to find a journal article, because no one seems to discuss that in our everyday biographies. But it has to be out there.
I love the Nature Journal community because you start these conversations that are so focused on something that would never come up in any other circle. What particular pigment was Beatrix Potter using?
I gotta look that up.
How has your nature journaling changed over time? Have you seen developments and change in how you nature journal?
Yes. So, starting as a teenager, it was just on my own time. When I had time, I would write down something about whatever I discovered. And then as a young mom with lots of little kids, there was really no time to do this. The time I would get would be if we went on a vacation, a holiday, which, you always have your hopes up. Oh, we're going on vacation. I'll get some time to do.
I do that every time. I pack so much stuff and never take it out at all.
But usually the mom still has to do just as much, if not more, work when she's on vacation. So I'd get something done. But, sometimes it would then mean not watching a movie in the evening and doing that. Yeah. So, but I'd get a little bit done. But now that my kids are mostly grown up, it's easier. And since it's my job, that helps a lot too. But I think now, I'm able to do so much more watercolor because that's kind of my love and focus. And before it might have been a little bit more just writing a few things down. I've always been a diarist since I was 11, and my grandmother gave me my first diary. I've kept them ever since. So, things have been recorded in pen. But now recently I get those moments for the watercolor.
I'm wondering about the senses. You've mentioned the senses a few times. I'm wondering about the senses and how you help your nature journal students connect with the senses and the importance of that for nature journaling.
I know. I give them these nature walk prompt sheets each week, or, whenever the space is for that. And I try to include something for a number of the senses on there, like a prompt, what do you smell? Or does this smell remind you of something? Does it cause a positive emotion or a negative one? I do think it's so important for us to try to experience as many senses as we can. And then sometimes I think it's helpful to just concentrate on one sense when we go on a walk or something, So maybe let's just work on our hearing today. Just what do we notice? The sounds. But I think we underestimate how important these other senses are besides our sight.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And for me, the sense of smell is really linked with memory. Do you find that smell can bring back a memory so stronger than any other sense for me?
Yes, it really does. And, I've forgotten that smell from when we lived in Uganda, but I just am always trying to strive to bring it back, because if I could just remember that smell, I feel like I'd actually be there. But it's like at Christmas when I smell maybe a tangerine and it just smells like Christmas to me, or
pine needles does something to me, and it takes me back to this very special moment that I had as a child under this pine forest. Yeah, it's this powerful. And encouraging students and practicing with children and practicing with adults to tune in to these senses. It becomes second nature, and you can just do that anytime you want to.
Yeah.
I saw this lovely video that you made, and it was explaining what is nature journaling. And what came across really strongly in the video is that nature journaling increases your feeling of gratitude. And I'd love for you to talk about the way nature journaling and gratitude are linked for you.
I think that, I really just cannot separate them, because my personal philosophy is that everything that I'm seeing and all of the wonder that my nature exploration is creating in me must flow out of me in gratitude. It's almost as if it stops inside of me, that it's not I don't know what the right word is, that it hasn't completed its work in me unless it comes out of me in a form of gratitude. And I just think that ought to be my posture when I'm noticing and observing nature, is to come away from it with this attitude of awe, wonder, and thanksgiving.
And that's part of your teaching as well. You sort of help guide students to feel this gratitude as well in nature, right?
Yes. And I just was listening to your podcast today about the gratidoodling.
I know. Is that the most amazing thing?
Oh, I need to tell all my students about that in that class. And I just love that. And I'm a really big advocate for even just keeping a list, no pictures included, just, just 3 things a day. And especially getting children to do this, I think it trains them early on for this practice.
Absolutely. I think gratitude practice with children is one of the most valuable things that we can help them live from that place, help them live from a sense that they're full of wonder every day. I think that's really powerful and important. Well, this leads on to a question you already touched on, because you know my podcast, you know what the things that I ask, but I often talk about the head and the heart, and gratitude is definitely a heart practice. And I'm wondering about that head and heart of nature journaling for you.
Well, I think the whole heart. I'm just so drawn to be out in nature, and when I'm able to be outside, it's just this feeling of, I'm where I belong. And all of this beauty and wonder kind of just floods in. And usually when I come back from a nature walk, I'm just feeling so different from when I began.
Yes.
So energized and relaxed and happy and grateful and new ideas. It happens without fail. And it's such a beautiful thing. It obviously clearly touches my heart so deeply. And then, the nature journal itself takes a little bit more work. So I think of that as the head. But, I want to analyze what I've seen and record it and think about it and ask questions and ponder. And so they really go hand in hand so well together.
They complement each other. And I don't know if this is a useful question. I've been asking it for a while, but I am really like led from the heart. But I absolutely think that they are important together, that they complement each other. And I do love working from the head as well in nature journaling. But I'm always fascinated about this stuff. I don't know.
Yes, yeah.
You have this wonderful thing that you do, which is you put out a weekly video about what you've seen in nature that week. I love this idea. And I'd love for you to talk about some nature discoveries that you've been investigating lately.
So I thought I would do it just sort of as a different way of exploring a different form of nature journal, which is another thing that I just love is how can we do out-of-the-box nature journaling?
Yes, and I love this too.
Oh, I especially loved when you had Sabrina on a stroke of nature. And she talked about creating with makeup different animals and insects and scenes. And that is just amazing. And, I think embroidery can be a form of nature journaling and maybe knitting in colors that match your landscape. All of these things. So anyway, the video is just a way to explore and keep a record and, see if I liked it. And so right now I feel like we're in an between summer and fall, and there's not a lot of wow happening, which always makes me say, well, then we just look closer and deeper. Yes. And so right now there's a lot of activity with the praying mantises, and they are, mating and putting their egg sacs. There must be a proper term for them, ready to overwinter. So and it's been a really amazing year for them. Usually I see one in my garden, and this year I've seen 5.
Really?
So I don't know. Different years have different things, but that's been fun. And we hatched a few monarch butterflies this week. So that was exciting. And we're kind of just, our leaves are going to be another month before they're really starting to turn. But the fall wildflowers are around, and the birds are going to start migrating through. So
amazing. And you have just recently launched the Nature Creative, which is a monthly nature journaling membership. Firstly, I just want to say congratulations. This is a very exciting launch. And I'd love for you to talk about the Nature Creative and what it will involve for people who join you.
Sure. Well, I wanted something that combined some of these elements. I wanted the seasonal nature journaling to be able to follow the seasons through the year. And I wanted something that was a little separate from the nature and nurture classes, where it's all the literature and the history and the nature. So this is more seasonal focus, but we have tea time. And we can't leave that out. And I wanted a bit more focus on, have a pen and ink activity each month and a color exploration activity each month. Some of these basic things that we can just really, sort of get into our repertoire, all focused on what's happening in our season. And it is the Northern Hemisphere that we're focusing on. But so I put out 6 tutorials, watercolor, pen and ink color, at the beginning of the month with a sit spot prompt. And then the second week we talk about a nature walk and the nature walk prompt. And then the third week is for our tea time, and there's a stationary download, so that just kind of encourage, maybe send a friend a note about your nature discoveries.
I love that.
And the last week is our gratitude, sort of, encapsulate the month and what you've explored and seen in a gratitude list. And we have an optional Zoom discussion at the end of the month, which is, kind of fun to meet with people from all over the world and hear what's happening. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah,
About this.
It sounds very nurturing. That's
Yes.
the word that comes to mind,
Yes.
like nurturing that quiet place in us, and also just, quietly observing. It sounds beautiful.
Oh, thanks. I'm excited about it. And there is a free 30-day trial. I wanted people to be able to try it out and see if it was for them.
Perfect. And so what's the best place for people to find out more about you, about your classes, about the new membership program?
You can find me at thenaturejournaler.com and also on Instagram, The Nature Journaler. So
Perfect.
both of those places.
Heather, thank you so much for joining me. It's been really, really lovely to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I just have enjoyed your podcast so much, and meeting so many people or being introduced to their work through your podcast.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Heather. The talk of all these British authors and landscapes made me want to read these books again, and it reminded me of my own experiences in the English countryside. When I was 19 years old, I lived for a while in North Yorkshire, and I did a walk there that was called the Cleveland Way. I walked alone in the North Yorkshire moors for a whole week, walking all day and staying in small villages overnight. There were times when I was alone on the moors with the wind and the rain and passing through landscapes that felt steeped in history. The walk ended in Scarborough actually, and I saw Anne Brontë's grave there, though the importance and significance of this was lost on me at that age because I hadn't read any of the Brontë's work. But now, looking back, I really value this glimpse into history and culture, and it feels really significant and important to have been there. So please take a look at the show notes for the links to Heather's online classes, and you can spend time with these important authors and also have tea time with Heather. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.